Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Tes, Daf 89 from Masechet Pesachim. Today's Daf, of course. We're going to continue on the sugya that we began yesterday about when you have 5 people who bring a korban pesach and then one of them has a wart, not the people, the pesach, and they don't know which one it is. So we say that you burn all of them. You can't eat any of the 5 korban pesachs, but none of them have to bring a pesach sheni. We will explore that. Joining and leaving a group and some other assorted korban pesach inyanim. And what happens when you have a group of people who are joining together for korban pesach and one of them has quite the appetite? Are his friends allowed to tell him, hey man, chill out, or you're going to have to leave? We're going to find out all of these inyonim on Daf Pei Tes. We're going to begin on Daf Pei Ches Amud Beis, about 2, 4, 5 lines from the bottom. Omar Mar, Uftur Melasos Pesach Sheni. So we said yesterday at the end of the Daf that if you have 5 fellows and they all bring their own korban pesach, and then they're chilling out afterwards, doing whatever people do afterwards, and they look and they see that one of the hides of the korban pesach taka has a wart on it, and a wart would make it a mum, which means that korban pesach is pasul. But the thing is that they don't know which one it belongs to. Meaning they have all their korban pesachs, but they don't necessarily know how to match each hide to the meat associated with each hide. They got kind of mixed together. So now you have a situation where one of these hides has a wart, which means that one of the korban pesachs is pasul, but we don't know to match the meat with the hide, and therefore there's a 20% chance that any one of those korban pesachs is taka the pasul one, is the one with the mum. So what do you do? So we said yesterday, burn all 5 of them. You can't eat any of them because we have to be concerned that maybe the one that you're eating is the one that had the wart, but at the same time you do not need to bring a pesach sheni. The question is, why not? What about the fact that one of them was pasul? One of them did not work as a pesach rishon. How could none of them have to do pesach sheni? That's what the Gemara wants to know. Amar Mar, we said earlier, uftur milasos pesach sheni, that in this situation, so they can't eat any of them, but there's no need for pesach sheni. Va'ika echad delo nafik. But we know that certainly one of them was a pasul korban pesach. So how could it be that none of them need to offer a pesach sheni? So the Gemara answers, mishum delo efshar eichi li'avid. Because the Gemara says, look, it's impossible. It's impossible. How are you going to bring a pesach sheni? Leisi kochad v'chad pesach. What, are we going to suggest that all 5 of them should bring a pesach sheni? Kamai sichun la'azar. You're going to be bringing chulin la'azar because 4 of them already did their pesach, right? Meaning, you have these 5 people, they have 5 korban pesachs, one of them turned out to be a wart, to have a wart on it, to be a mum, and it's pasul. But if all 5 of them bring a pesach sheni, well, if 4 out of 5 of them were already yotzei with the first pesach, well then whatever they're bringing now is not actually a korban, in which case it's chulin, and you're bringing chulin la'azara, so 4 out of 5 of them are going to be chulin la'azara. That's a problem. Right? You're not allowed to bring non-consecrated animals into the azar. Leisi kulu chad pesach. Okay, what if you do the opposite? What if all 5 of them chip in for 1 korban pesach, and you'll just bring that one, and then memele, it'll be a korban pesach for whoever of the 5 needs it. Nimtza pesach nechosh lo lemnuya, but that's not going to work because you can't have 5 people grouped together for 1 korban pesach if only one of them needs it. Meaning you have 4 out of 5 of them already, their pesach rishon was kosher, which means that they already were part of a pesach a month earlier. So they can't be part of a pesach sheni now. Only one of them is going to need to really be part of this korban, but 4 out of 5 of them are not going to be associated with this korban because the fact of the matter is, whether they know it or not, they were already Yotzei with the Pesach Rishon, so they can't just join a Pesach Sheni. So 4 out of 5 of them are going to be eating a korban Pesach that they weren't part of. So Haimai, so what do we do? Oh, excuse me. So what do we do? So okay, so the Gemara has a suggestion. Why don't we maybe do the following? Everybody, all 5 of them, will bring a Pesach Sheni, and they'll make a condition, a stipulation. V'neiman, they'll say, Ididi ba'mum, if mine was the one with the mum, well then, Haida Aisi Ashton Ne'avi Pesach. Well, then the korban that I'm bringing now, as a Pesach Sheni, should be a korban Pesach. Kedu should be treated as a Pesach Sheni. V'ididi tam, and if my Pesach Rishon was one of the 4 kosher ones, well then, Haida Aisi Ashta Ne'avi Shlomim. Well then, this one should just be a Shlomim. So all 5 of them will bring a Pesach Sheni, and they'll make a condition. They'll say, look, if mine was the apostle Pesach Rishon, so then this should be a Pesach Sheni. If mine was one of the kosher ones, well then this is just Pashat Shlamim. Okay, fine. The Gemara says, Lo Esher. You still can't do that. Well, what the heck is going on over here? Excuse me. Well, there's a little bit of a difference because korban Pesach and korban Shlomim don't exactly have the same protocol. Korban Pesach, you take the fats or whatever, the imurim, the kidneys, you take them, the diaphragm, you take it and you put it on the mizbeach. The rest of it goes to the owner. A Shlomim, on the other hand, parts of it go on the mizbeach, but then the chazav v'shok, the breast and the thigh, go to the kohen. So now the question is, so what do you do here? If it's a korban Pesach, it all goes to the owner. If it's a Shlomim, you got to give the chazav v'shok to a kohen. So you can't just swap them out so easily. V'neisi kol chad v'chad kohen bahade. So now the Gemara suggests, okay, so let's find a solution here. Why don't each 5 of them also bring a kohen with them? So that way, they'll make this stipulation. They'll say, if mine was the kosher one, well then this is just a shlomim. And if mine was the apostle one, meaning if mine was one of the kosher ones, then this is a shlomim. If mine was the apostle one, so then this is taka a korban pesach. You then give the chazav v'shok to the kohen, and mimanav shochi eats it. Kilu, if it's a shlomim, he's eating it as a shlomim. And if it's a korban pesach, he's eating it as somebody who is part of the korban pesach group. Now, hai kohen echidami, who exactly is this kohen? David pesach. If this kohen had already done pesach rishon, well then, duma hai pesach uvenimtze pesach nechash lo nuyav. Well, if this kohen had already offered a pesach rishon a month earlier, well then it's not going to work, because in the event that the owner of this particular korban that this kohen is associated with, if that owner's korban the first time around was the puzzle one, well then what he's offering now is taka korban pesach, and if the kohen had already done a pesach rishon, well then he can't be yotze on another korban pesach, in which case it's going to be eaten by somebody who's not associated with it. Vid'lo avid pesach, and if this kohen did not do a pesach rishon, so now he needs to do a pesach sheni, well, Dilma Shlomimu, lo avid Pesach. Well, what if the owner of this animal was one of the 4 whose korban was kosher for the Pesach Rishon, which means that this animal being offered now is taka a shlomim. Now, if the kohen didn't yet bring a Pesach Rishon and he's counting on this to be a Pesach as a Pesach Sheni, well, if the owner was already yotze with the Pesach Rishon, well, this is just a shlomim. So while he might enjoy eating this korban shlomim, but he still needs to bring a korban Pesach. So the Gemara suggests, fine. V'neisi kulu chamisha chad koyin tilo avid Pesach v'nimne ilove ani chamisha psachim. What do you guys think about that? Let's read that again. V'neisi kulu chamisha chad koyin. So let all 5 of the people produce one kohen for all of them. To lo avid pesach, who did not yet bring his korban pesach. V'nimnei ilavik hani chamisha pesachim. And then have him sort of be part of all 5 of these Pesach Shenis, right? So basically, you have these 5 people from the Pesach Rishon, that things got messed up, now they have to bring Pesach Sheni. Let all of them bring a Pesach Sheni. Let each one make the same stipulation, that if their initial one was kosher, this is a shlamim. If their initial one was pasul, then this is a korban Pesach. And then all 5 of them bring one kohen for all of them. He has not yet done his korban Pesach, so he needs to do a Pesach Sheni now. And because he's associated with all of them, so for 4 out of 5 of them, he's going to be eating shlamim, but for one of them, he's going to be eating korban Pesach, right? So you give the chazav v'shok of all 5 korbans to the kohen, and then mimanav shach memele, one of the animals that he ate was the korban Pesach. So he's yotzezan with the korban Pesach, and he also gets to eat lots of shlamim. Not a bad position for Mr. Cohen. Because either way you look at it, that there's going to be one of the 5 animals, or really one of the 5 people, who had not yet done his korban Pesach, and is going to be offering it, and this animal is going to be taka korban Pesach, and this kohen now is going to be able to be yotze his chiyuv of a korban Pesach, which with whichever one of these 5 is now going to be the korban Pesach. So Gemara says, we're getting close, but no siga, because he's being memayit b'achilas kachim. Again, the korban Pesach and the shlamim are not exactly interchangeable. We're getting close, but still, we're hitting another roadblock. This is what happens when you try to do hacks, you know? This is what always happens with a hack. You think, like, I have a good idea, let's just, like, make a stipulation, like Pesach and shlamim. There's always going to be issues. We started out with the fact that you need a kohen to eat the shlamim, there's different emurim. We said, fine, we put together some other hack to kind of get, like, a bunch of people so that then Mimele, like, will come out and have a korban Pesach. But now there's another problem, which is, the fact of the matter is that, well, a korban Pesach is only eaten for one night, whereas a korban shlamim is eaten for 2 days. Now, what's going to happen is if we're treating this like a Pesach Sheni, well then the next day already, right, this is Pesach Sheni, it's not Pesach Rishon, so the next day is just a regular day, it's not Yom Tiv. So the next day, whatever you didn't finish, you're going to have to burn. Now, if it's a shlamim, you can eat it the next day. And if you end up burning it, you're going to be burning kosher kachim, which we don't want you to do. So, we're getting close, but you know, there's just more questions. So, the ilu Pesach liom v'layla, because a Pesach you can eat for one night. V'ilu shlamim l'shnei yom v'layla echad, where shlamim is eaten for 2 days and the night in between. So v'nesi moser Pesach. So now the Gemara has an interesting solution, which is, why don't you bring leftover korban Pesachs? Meaning, we've learned in the past that moser Pesach karev shlamim, that let's say you have a fellow, and he sets aside an animal to be a korban Pesach, and for whatever reason he doesn't offer it as a korban Pesach, and now it's a week later. So you can offer it as a shlamim. So the Gemara suggests something interesting, which is, well, why don't they just bring, right, their stipulation, why don't they say, well, if my korban is pasul, if my initial korban was pasul, so then this is a Pesach Sheni. If my initial korban was kosher, so then this should be a mosar shlamim. This should be a mosar Pesach. This should then be a Pesach that wasn't offered at its proper time. Now you might be wondering, well, it either is or it isn't. The Gemara is wondering the same thing. V'nema, and let him say, ididi ba'mum, if mine was the ba'mum, haida asiyashta ne'avi Pesach, if my original korban was a ba'mum, so then this should be a korban Pesach. Ididi tam, who, if my initial korban was one of the 4 kosher ones, well then, ne'avi haida asiyashta shlomim. And if not, if my initial korban was kosher, so then this should be a shlomim. The Mosar Pesach nechol And the reason why we want to do this is because Moser Pesach, leftover korban pesachs that are offered as korban shlamim, still have the halacha of a korban pesach in that it's eaten only for the day it's offered and that night. Although in the case of korban pesach, really, you're really only eating it at night. Although maybe if it's a Moser shlamim, you can eat it that day, whatever it is. But now the Gemara says, "Mafrishin tchila lemosaros." How can you just set aside a Moser Pesach? Either it is or it isn't, right? A Moser Pesach is a specific thing. It's an animal that was set aside as a korban Pesach, and for whatever reason you didn't slaughter it as a korban Pesach. Now it's the next day, so it's memele. It's a leftover animal. It's an animal that was set aside as a korban Pesach, which wasn't slaughtered as a korban Pesach. So now it's left over. It's a Moser Pesach. It's a remnant Pesach that wasn't slaughtered. But you can't just say, I'm going to set you aside to be a Moser Pesach. It doesn't work like that. It's only a b'diavad kilu. It's only the kind of thing that after the fact you could say, it was left over. You can't just designate it as being a leftover korban pesach. So Moser Pesach. So the Gemara says, fine, okay. So let's find a korban pesach. We'll push it, go on Greg's list, and we'll say, in search of Moser Pesach, did you set aside a korban to be your korban pesach, and you missed, for whatever reason it didn't happen? We're looking to buy it, cash. So find a Moser Pesach, and in that case, everything should work. Our hack could work. You make the stipulation, you get your Kohen who has not yet done a Pesach Rishon, all 5 of you bring him together, and then you find a bunch of Moser Pesachs, and you make your stipulations about, if your korban was kosher, then this is going to be a Moser Pesach. Or this is Moser Pesach, and it's eaten for the same time frame as a korban, korban Pesach, the Moser Pesach, the Shlam, they're all eaten now at the same time frame. Elim shum smicha. Dang. Another problem. Well, a korban Pesach, you don't do smicha. Smicha is when you lean on the animal before you slaughter it. So, korban Pesach, you don't do smicha, whereas a Shlam, you would do smicha. And therefore, even if you bring this Moser Pesach, then the question becomes, what do I do about smicha? Because the Pesach requires smicha, the Pesach doesn't require smicha, the Shlam does. So do you do smicha? Don't you do smicha? It's a mess. Therefore we can't bring anything. Dilu Pesach lo ba'i smicha, vilu Moser ba'i smicha. So atenach korban anoshim, so I can understand why we're saying that nobody has to bring a Pesach Sheni when it comes to men, because men do smicha. Korban noshim ma'ikah l'meimar. But what about women? Women don't do smicha, and therefore they don't do smicha. So then this problem goes away. So why don't we say that if it was women who brought these 5 korban pesachs and they got mixed together, they should have to bring a Pesach Sheni, just bring the animals Moser Pesach, bring a Kohen, kilo, a whole mess. But theoretically, you can make this hack work. Selim shumatanos. No, the hack still isn't going to work, because you have to worry about how you're going to get the blood on the mizbeach. Dilu Pesach matana achas. Because Pesach, you just you pour the blood onto the mizbeach once. Vilu shlam shtayim shein dalet. Whereas by shlam, you do 2 that are 4. What's 2 that are 4? 2 that are 4 means that you throw the blood onto the mizbeach on opposite corners. So basically what happens if you take, let's say, a bucket of water and you throw it onto a corner? Well, some of the water is going to get onto one side and the other one's going to get onto the other side. The water is going to be basically split by the corner and go onto both sides. So if you do this on 2 opposite corners, so the maaseh, there's going to be, so if you're doing it with blood, so the maaseh, there's going to be blood on all 4 sides. Got it? Makes sense? So when it comes to korban pesach, you just pour the blood on the mizbeach once. When it comes to shlamim, you do shtayim shein arba, which is all 4 sides of the mizbeach. So my nafkamina, the Gemara says, but who cares? Vatnam, we learn in the Mishnah, kol nitanen al mizbeach achitzon shenesanen b'matana achas kiper. Look, lemaise, anything that's thrown, any blood that goes on the outer mizbeach, if you did it in one matana, it works. So even if this shlamim you did with one matana like the korban pesach, it would be fine. So don't worry about that. So yeah, but there's another difference, which is the korban pesach has you pour it on the mizbeach, Whereas Hashlamim, you throw the blood on the Mizbeach. But again, who cares? But we have a Bryce that says that anything that you're supposed to throw on the Mizbeach, that you poured on the Mizbeach instead, it works. So, Eimar de Karminon di Eved, Nechatchila Nami, we'll say, yeah, that works with the Eved. If Lemaise, you poured it on the Mizbeach, even though you're supposed to throw it on the Mizbeach, Beseder. It works. But that we're not going to suggest that you should do that Lechatchila, and therefore, there isn't really a way for you to bring, right, in the situation where you have 5 korbanos that got mixed together, there isn't really a way that you'd be able to offer a korban, a pesach sheni, and therefore you don't offer a pesach sheni. You just burn all 5 korbanos, and that's that. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Okay, new Mishnah. Omer Levanov Arini Shoichet as a Pesach al Misha Yaile Mikem Rishon Yerushalayim. Kem Sheichlis Arishon Rosh of Rubo Zach Bechelko Mazak Esecha Vimo. You hear this? Very funny, right? Well, arguably funny. Omer Levanov, if you have a fellow and he says to his children, Arini Shoichet as a Pesach al Misha Yaile Mikem Rishon Yerushalayim. He makes a race for his children. He says, look, whoever gets to Jerusalem first, I'm going to slaughter the korban pesach for him, nobody else. Or at least that's the implication. We're going to have to see in the Gemara what it really means. But at face value, you have a father, he says to his children, look, whoever gets to Jerusalem first, I'm including in my korban pesach. The rest of you, fend for yourselves. So once the first, whoever is taking the lead, once he sticks his head and most of his body inside of Jerusalem, he gets the korban pesach. Zacha bechelko, he gets his portion of Mizaka Esecha Vimo, and then he can give from his portion to his other siblings. So says the Gemara, Shmamina yesh breira. So that implies that there's breira, that we can go back in time and Photoshop, meaning that from the fact that this kid can give his portion to his other siblings and they can eat it, means that there must be breira, i.e. that when he gives it to them at the time that they're eating, we can go back in time and say that at the time that the slaughtering happened, they were included in the group. To which Rabbi Yochanan says, no, that's not the case at all. Rather, really the father had in mind all of the children, and all the children are included in the korban pesach. So what was the deal with, I'm only including the first person to get there? It was just he wanted to, give them a little bit of motivation. Hey, whoever gets there first is going to be included in the korban pesach. But really, he was including all of them. And Tekanam, you can also infer this, Tekatani Mizaka Echav Imo, that you're able to, that the one who gets the korban pesach is able to then give it to his brothers. Yomar B'Shloma da Amninu Meikara Shapir, makes sense if they were included already from the beginning. But if they weren't included initially, then how could the child who won, how could he just include his brothers after the shechita? But now we learn in a Mishnah that we're going to learn in a second. You're allowed to join and also leave a korban pesach until the shechita happens. But once the shechita happens, it's too late. Everything's done. Shmamina, so we see that really, the fact of the matter is that the father had included all of the children in advance. When the korban pesach was slaughtered, he had everybody in mind. He just wanted to make a shtickle fun, Tananami, we also see that, he wasn't the only one who made getting to Jerusalem into a game. I guess it makes sense, Jerusalem's at the top of the mountain over there. We use cars, but once upon a time, I guess it was more difficult to get up there, so he made it into a race. One time the girls won. And then, so the girls were very fastidious and fast, and the boys were lowly. They must have felt terrible. Vaiter says the Mishnah, Le'olam nimnin olav ad sheyiyeh bo kazayis l'chol echad ve'echad. So you can keep on filling up the korban pesach kilu. You can as we saw the other day, right? You can even get to the point where the only thing left is the brains, right? So you can keep on adding more people to the Pesach group until there's only a kazayas for each person. Once already there's not going to be enough for a kazayas for each person, so then you got to get a new animal. You can join and leave groups until the shechita happens. That's the cutoff. But Rabbi Shimon Omer, Ad she'yizrok hasadam. Rabbi Shimon says until zrikas hadam. That meaning, and we're going to see in the Gemara exactly what this means, but he says it's basically a further stage, not just the shechita, but even the zrikas hadam. Zok the Gemara, ma kamash malon, ha kamash malon. This is what the Mishnah is teaching us. Tafagav the ibnei olav chabur zo chozeres v'nimnin olav chabur acheres. Interesting that even though you have one chabura, you get 10 people, they decide they're going to get a korban pesach. Until the shechita happens, they could actually say, you know what, we're going to bounce, and then a completely other group can come and join in on that korban pesach. Until the korban pesach is slaughtered, all sorts of things can change. Says the Mishnah, Nimnu Moshkin es Yidei and Ashi Shachit v'chulei. So Amar Abai machlokas li Moshech. So the machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Tanakama. The Tanakama says until Shrita. Reb Shimon says it's a little bit further until Zrika. That's specifically in terms of being able to leave a korban pesach. The Tanakama says you can leave a korban pesach until Shrita. Reb Shimon says you can leave a korban pesach until Zrika. The Rabbanan Tzavim mihiyos miseh michayuseh adiseh. That the Rabbanon learn out that when the pasuk says Vim yima tabayis miyos miseh, that if you want to be mimayit, if you want to leave the korban, so it's miyos miseh michayuseh diseh. When the as long as the animal is still alive, you could leave the group. Reb Sherman Savar mehaviyosa diseh, that it's in the existence of the seh, which I guess somehow means until Zrika Sadam. As long as the avoda has not yet been completed, you could still leave the korban pesach. Avalimanos, but in terms of to join the korban pesach, everyone agrees that you can only join a korban pesach until it's slaughtered. The pasuk says b'michsas nefashos v'adu tachosus. The pasuk says b'michsas nefashos, sort of the group of people that are going to eat the korban pesach, and then it says tachosu, you should slaughter it. So first join and then slaughter. Once you've slaughtered, you can no longer join, but you could still leave until Zrikas Adam, according to Reb Shimon. You can join and leave a korban pesach until the Shrita. Reb Shimon Omer, Reb Shimon says that you could join the korban pesach until Shrita, but you can leave the korban pesach up until the Zrikas Adam. We get to a new Mishnah. Mamana imo acher bechelko. What happens if you come to the Seder, five people joined together for a korban pesach, and then comes to the Seder, and all of a sudden Reuven shows up with 3 friends, and everyone's like, who are these people? We didn't know about them. And, they would have had to already been included from the beginning. So maybe like Reuven's the one who did the Shrita. He gets his 3 friends before the Shrita, and at the end of the day, he shechts the korban pesach for everybody. But not everybody knew who was coming. And all of a sudden, Reuven rolls up with 3 extra people. So if a fellow brings on more people for his portion, so the rest of the group could say, hey, Reuven, we're 5 partners over here. 20% of the korban pesach is yours. Take your 20%, take your friends, get out of here, eat it amongst yourselves. Don't even think about eating our 80%. So the rest of the group can just give him the portion that is becoming to him. He takes his 20% and eats it with his friends, and then the rest of the group eats what they expected to be eating, which is, the remaining 80% they divide amongst themselves. They want to know, now how does this apply in a different case? Right? Meaning in the first case, Reuven all of a sudden showed up with extra people, and we're like, hey, take your portion and get out of here. What about if there's no extra people? 5 friends got together for korban pesach, or maybe acquaintances, and everybody shows up, but it turns out that one of them has quite the appetite, and he's pashut devouring the korban pesach. As Rashi says, Mimar lechol harbe, he very quickly eats a lot of food, and therefore everyone's like, wait, what's the deal with this guy? If we don't get him out of here, he's going to eat the whole korban pesach, and we're not going to get anything, or at least not very much. So they want to know, what happens if you have a group, but one of them is eating a lot more than everybody else? Can they say, hey, dude, take your, if there are 5 people, dude, take 20% of the korban, get the heck out of here. Do we say Matzi Amarlu Hakabilton? Do we say that this fellow can respond and say, hey, you knew I was coming. You accepted me in your group. Leave me alone. As Rashi says, Kabilton kibaltuni alechem, you accepted me upon yourselves. Lecho b'chol kochi b'dam malalu. It was an all you can eat, as far as I'm concerned. You accepted upon me to eat with all of my strength for this fixed price. I came to an all you can eat. You can't throw me out of here. Or maybe they could say to him, Ki kablinon, v'sikun izvicha, adaita da'acha tveminon, lo kablino. Right? He says, look, when we accepted you because we needed to make a group to eat korban pesach, so we'll make sure to eat all the meat, and there won't be any noser, nothing will be left over. We didn't accept you into our group, so you'll eat the whole thing by yourself. Tashma, come in here. Well, our Mishnah had said that if Reuven shows up with a bunch of friends, our Mishnah had said that if Reuven shows up with a bunch of friends, so the rest of the group could say, hey, Reuven, take your percentage that's shaykh to you from the original agreement, and then you can go eat it with your friends. And then the other group members will eat the rest of the korban pesach. So my time, now shouldn't that be similar to when somebody's eating more than everybody else? Kilu, you have a situation where one group member is taking more than was originally intended. Whether it's because he shows up with a bunch of people, or whether it's because he's got a big appetite. So the Gemara wants to suggest that, well, just like when Reuven shows up with a bunch of people, we could say skedaddle, scrum, scram, sayonara. So also when he shows up with a big appetite, we should be able to say, hey, take whatever percentage is becoming to you and get out of here. Now if it enters your mind that in a situation when somebody's got a big appetite, he could just say to them, well, you accepted me in your group, live with it. Well, shouldn't the person in our Mishnah be like a similar thing, which is you accept me into your group, live with the fact that I brought extra people? Amri lo, Deus shani. We say, no, they're not the same. Because it's different when a person shows up with extra people than when a person shows up and he was supposed to show up and he's just hungry. Because even if Reuven and all of his friends were very light eaters and they were really just not going to eat more than all the other individuals were going to eat, meaning them in total wouldn't eat more than all the other individuals, they could still say, look, we don't want these extra people. We created a group that we want. I don't know who these people are. Don't show up with extra people. So therefore, in the Mishnah, Kilu, it has nothing necessarily to do with like, you accepted me, except, you have to live with it, because they could say, look, we don't want these extra people. Whereas when it comes to the fellow who's got an appetite, he could theoretically argue, he said, look, you accepted me. I came. Toshma kamir ashamish. We learned the other day that if you have a waiter, shachol kazayis basar b'tzaratoner, if you have a waiter who ate a kazayis of the korban pesach, meaning while he was preparing, he had a group to be eating korban pesach with, and while he was preparing the korban pesach, he ate part of it. He wasn't paying attention, he was cutting it up, whatever it is, and he ate part of it. So now he can't go to the rest of the group and continue eating there because you can only eat it in one place. So if he was smart, he would just fill up, eat his right amount at that point because he can't eat anywhere else at this point. And if the other people in the group wanted to be nice to him and join him, so they can come if they want and join him where he is, sitting next to the oven in the kitchen. But it says the Gemara, Ratzu in lo Ratzu lo. But that's only if they want to. They don't have to be nice. If they want, they could say, all right, sorry, buddy. All right, we're going to go back and eat the korban pesach at the table. They don't need to go and eat with him. Ve'amai, why not? Nemelu hakabilton. Why shouldn't he be able to say, you accepted me in your group, and therefore if I accidentally ate some of the korban pesach here in the kitchen, now I can't join you. You should have to come to me. You accepted me upon yourself. Accept me with all of my faults and fadichas. And therefore, from the fact that he's unable to wield that power over the rest of the group, so maybe I can argue that also when it comes to this fellow with the big appetite, he would be unable to wield the power, and they'll be able to send them off. No, they're still not analogous. Analogous? Analogous. They're not analogous because in the case of the waiter, they could say, look, when we accepted you in our group, we assumed that you were going to eat with us, not that we were going to have to schlep over to you. Whereas again, in our case, that argument isn't there. He's coming, he's eating with them. They had, nothing really changed other than the fact that they're impressed by this fellow's appetite. Tashma coming here. What happens, like we're talking about, when you have a group that one of them has quite the appetite? They are allowed to say to this fellow, hey, fellow, you're one of 5, take your 20% and go elsewhere. We don't really want you eating the whole thing by yourself. Not only that, that this isn't only by the korban pesach, but even just in general. You push it, 4 friends go to a pizza store and they order a pie pizza. So, if very quickly it's clear that one of them is devouring the slices and will be moving on to the 3rd slice before other people have finished their 1st slice, they could say, hey buddy, we're 4 people here, there's 8 slices, each person gets 2, and that's that. So what do we see from there? So we see that it's pretty clear that when it comes to the pesach, the korban pesach, if one fellow is eating more than everybody else, they could say, buddy, only take what's, the percentage that's becoming to you. What's this like, and not only that? What's the chiddush of the pizza pie? Lo mibaya kamer. It's saying not only this, but even that. Lo mibaya pesach tamatzi amrele. Right? It's not only by the korban pesach, or certainly by the korban pesach, the people in the group can say, ki kavlinach, that when we accepted you in our group, l'sakuni zvicha, we accepted you to be part of our korban pesach, so we can be yotze the mitzvah of korban pesach, that there won't be any noser, but not for you to go to town. But even by people getting a pie pizza, you're not getting a pie pizza because you need X amount of pizza. You're getting a pie pizza because you're hanging out with your friends. That sounds nice. So meaning, I might think by the pie pizza, it's not really about the amounts over here. It's about the friendship. You get a pie pizza, you shoot the breeze, you talk about interesting topics. How much pizza any one individual eats is not the issue over here. It's less important. So therefore, maybe one of them can eat half the pizza by himself and leave the rest for everybody else. So we say, no, even in that case, where it's, sure, it is about kinship and camaraderie and sitting with friends and what did they used to call that? Sheves Achim or Asifas Chaverim, Afabrengen. Even so, don't take more than is becoming to you. Let's go weiter in Shas. Where are we? Ikidamre, to those who say, Hello Ibayilan, this is actually not our question. Elahachi Ibayilan. Elahachi hudi Ibayilan. This is our question. When you have people in a group, can they lichatchila divide up? So meaning, we had said, let's just say in our Mishnah, that if you have one guy shows up with more than with too many people, so then you could say, hey bro, take, if there are 5 people, take your 20%, skedaddle. But can you do that milechatchila? You have 5 people, they come together on a korban pesach. There's no reason to assume that anybody's going to eat more than anybody else, or that nobody showed up with any extra people. Can you just say, look, we're 5 people, let's divide it in 5 ways, and we'll each get an equal portion, and that's that? Or does it have to be more of like a buffet kind of thing? You take the lamb, you put it on the table, and everyone just kind of eats without, nobody's paying attention to what everybody else is doing. Right? Chabur rashan lechalek or inan rashan lechalek. Can they just give everybody their portion in advance or not? Tashma, come in here. B'nei chabur shayu yadav shlechad ben yafos. So we said that if you have this group and one of them has a bigger appetite than everybody else, so rashan lomar tochel chavetzei. So in that case, they could say, look, take your portion and get out of here. Yadav yafos in and yadav yafos lo shmamina. So the Gemara wants to say, yeah, that's dafka in a case where you have somebody who has a concerning appetite. But just if that's not the case, and you have no reason to assume that anybody is going to be eating more than his share, so then don't do that. Just put the animal in the middle of the table and eat it. Rav Papa, Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua, Arivu Rifta Ba'adei Adadei. Rav Papa and his friend Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua were eating bread together. Ada Achar Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua Chada, Achar Rav Papa Arba. And in the amount of time that it took Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua to eat 1 portion, Rav Papa already ate 4 times that amount. Kilu Rav Papa was going through the food 4 times as quickly as Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua. Amalei Plagli. So Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua says, hey, Rav Papa, wait up. We're 2 people. Give me half, and you take half. At this rate, you're gonna eat 4 times as much as I will. Amalei Kabilta. Rav Papa says, too late. You accepted to eat with me. So eat with me regardless of how much I'm eating. If I eat 75% of it, so be it. So Eiz v'kolani tiyuvta v'shana k'deshaninan. So Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua tried to ask all of the questions. For example, well, what about the fact that we said that like by korban pesach, if a guy shows up with extra people, he could say skedaddle. Or if he's got a bigger appetite, he could say get out of there. Rav Papa gave the answers that we gave, which is like kabilton and things like, or that's specifically by the korban pesach, whether it's because of deos or whatever it is. Eis v'bnei chabura. He asked him, what about the fact that when you have the fellow who eats too much from the korban pesach, they could say get out of here. That's specifically, so Rav Papa says, yeah, but that's specifically by korban pesach, because we included you in terms of the halachis and the restrictions of a korban pesach, but that wouldn't apply here. Eis v'siboles palagle. Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua then says, yeah, but what about the fact that it says, and the same thing applies even to a pie of pizza, to which Rav Papa says, good point. And he begrudgingly, possibly, split their food in half, and Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua got his half at his pace. Also, Arv Badi Ravina. Now, another time, Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua ate with Ravina. Ad Achar Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua Chada, Achar Ravina Tmanya. In the amount of time that it took for Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua to eat 1 portion, Ravina ate 8 portions, 8 times the amount that Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua ate. Omar mea papi v'lochada Ravina. To which Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua said, I would rather have 100 Rav Papas and not 1 Ravina. Alright, very good. Sounds very nice. Tana Rabbanan, the Rabbi said, Mamana acherim imo al pischo val chagigaso mo shebiyadu chulin. So if a fellow chops some people to join him on his portion of the korban pesach, and he charges them to join him. They had to buy in. So, on his korban pesach, or on his korban chagiga, the chagigas yudalid, right, the korban that they would bring, so that as the main meal. So Moshe biyado chulin. So the money that they paid to buy in is chulin. And if you have a fellow that he sets aside a korban ola or a korban shlamim, and then he sells it to somebody else, the money that he received is nothing. And the money becomes a donation to the Beis HaMikdash. So now the Gemara says, if we just said that whatever money you pay for the ola or the shlamim is nothing, then why are we saying that it becomes a donation to the Beis HaMikdash? So Rava kinasa. Rava says it's a knas, it's a fine, that to teach this fellow a lesson that he shouldn't have bought korbanos that were already set aside to be an ola or shlamim, we fine him and we say, if you do this, you're going to lose the money, you're not going to get your ola and your shlamim, and you're going to have to donate it to the Beis HaMikdash. Umay kol shein, what does it mean that the most kol shein? What's this kol shein? Afagav de lo havu ela arba'a v'avu lechamisha afilu b'ayi yisera nami kansur rabbanon. Let's say the shlamim or the ola was only worth 4 zuz and he paid 5 zuz for it, so maybe you think that at least that extra zuz, shouldn't have to be donated. So we say, no, the whole thing has to go to is included in the fine, and all of it has to go to the Beis HaMikdash. So what do you guys think about Daf Pei Tes? It's exciting. Tomorrow we're up to Daf Tzadi already. That's a big deal, big milestone. Anyways, so what do we talk about today? So yeah, the first part of the Daf was a little bit more involved than I foresaw it being. I guess I knew that it could potentially become lengthy, but yeah, what happens when you have those 5 people, they bring their korban pesachs, one of them ends up having a wart on it, and you're not sure which hide with the wart belongs to which korban pesach, so we say you got to burn all of them, because you can't eat out of any of them, because we don't know which korban pesach, or who's the one who brought the pasul one, so you can't eat any of them, you burn all of them, but nobody has to bring a pesach sheni, and we basically concluded because there really is no way for them to bring a pesach sheni. Any suggestion that since they don't know who's the pasul one, there really is no way for them to bring a pesach sheni in a way that will work. So that's why they don't bring a pesach sheni. We gave all sorts of suggestions that we threw out, all sorts of hacks and things. We discussed also this father who makes this interesting contest for his children to race to Jerusalem, and whoever gets there first gets the korban pesach, to which we said that was really just a motivational method, but all the children could really eat the korban pesach. They were all included. Joining and leaving a group. So everyone agrees that in order to join a group, that has to be before the animal is slaughtered. However, in terms of being able to leave a group, we have a machlokes. Tanakama says that you can leave the group until the shechita. Reb Shimon says that you could leave the group up until the zrikas hadam. And then we got into these discussions about what happens when there are people in the korban pesach who are acting in unexpected ways, whether it's because they show up with extra people, or it's because they show up with an extra appetite and they're just eating a lot. So we basically say, in these cases, you could say to the fellow, hey, take the part that you deserve, that, percentage-wise is shaykh to you, and get out of here. And we say that the same thing applies also, even if you just have friends eating together. Also, you could theoretically say, look, we're X amount of people, each person gets X amount, and don't take more than is becoming to you. Friends, have a great day. Peace out.